Well,
Hello.
6.5 shows into the tour, and the momentum seems to be continuing and maybe even building. A fine first set.
I'll say. So really, I was noticing there were no gazintas. Every song ended and then another
Yes.
one started, which is somewhat interesting. And it was more like short songs, but there were some wicked ass jams in there too. So I'm not complaining.
Yeah, and sometimes those short song first sets sort of portend something more expansive in the second set. One giant, seamless, unending suite of music. So we'll see. We'll see what the boys have up their sleeve. They're full of surprises, as they were last night with a Hell in the Bucket deep in the second set, post drums. I can't remember when or if I've ever heard that. And they're mixing it up.
Yeah,
That's all I'm saying.
there was there was a little jam before Hell in a Bucket too that was kind of interesting. It just sort of they set up a groove that I thought might turn into Hell in a Bucket, but it went on for a really long time before
Yes.
Bobby pulled the trigger and they did that thing of downshifting into whatever the gear of the key was to do the song itself. But that was really another like pleasant surprise in the middle of all this. So yeah, let's see what set two has to offer. What you just heard, they opened with Good Times, did Cold Rain and Snow, Iko Iko, somewhat surprising in that spot, Ship of Fools, Big River, Here Comes Sunshine, and Cassidy with a great jam in the middle of it.
Here Comes Sunshine had a not too shabby jam either. And we are here on this show called Dead Air. We being me, Gary Lambert, and over there, am I pointing the right way? Yes, I am, David Gans. It's not like looking in the mirror here, folks. It's sometimes disorienting. But we are here on behalf of Nugs.net, who are bringing you this live stream of the entire show, or you may be catching this as the free preview of set two. They offer this free preview to give you an idea of what you might see if you do connect with Nugsnet and purchase individual shows or the entire package of the tour, which you would get at a discount. And you can also subscribe to Nugs.net on different levels to access an amazing archive library, what you will, of music, streaming music. The only online streaming service totally dedicated to live music. And that's a really valuable thing for all of us live music freaks. And I know I'm speaking to a lot of you out there. You can get these live streams. You can stream an amazing, deep archive of stuff from so many bands, Dead and Company and various Grateful Dead family bands. But there's also stuff by Fish and Wilco. And they just added for streaming Bruce Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen has had a deal with Nugs for releasing vintage shows for download for some years. But now they have put out a fantastic career spanning library of stuff. They call it the Freehold Drop, Freehold being Bruce Springsteen's hometown. And it shows dating back to the legendary Roxy show in 1975, but right when Born to Run had just come out, and all the way up to 2014 with the E Street Band, some Bruce solo stuff. So if you are a Bruce Springsteen maniac, I confess I am, you will
Me
really
too.
want to check this out. I just dipped a toe in it this afternoon, and I'm really excited that this development has happened on Nugs. But you can get so much stuff from Nugs, different levels of involvement and engagement, different technical. You can get higher res streaming and higher res recordings. You can purchase recordings for download. It's an amazing, amazing system, and we're very happy to represent it here on these shows.
And also, if you just want the Dead and Company current stuff, you can get the audio downloads of these shows in various formats also from nugs.net. I believe there's a link you can go to, nugs.net/deadco, that takes you directly to the specific things that are related to this band. And we know that the archive, their audio archive, includes every freaking show they played going back to 2016 when the band was brand new. So it's worth exploring, and they are the reason why we're here, which is why we're telling you about them.
That's right.
And
There
now
is a
maybe
free
we can move
trial.
on to our.
I was just going to say there's
Go
a
for
free
it.
trial, by the way, too. So you can check it out for 7 days. And we think you'll be hooked if you listen to some of this archival stuff. If you have seen this free preview, you can go back and watch this entire show or go back and watch earlier shows in the tour. If you were at the show if you're watching this tomorrow and you were at the show last night and you want to, and we allow time travel on nugs.net. You can go back and hear that amazing Here Comes Sunshine that just blew you away moments ago, but now it's yesterday. How does it work? I don't know. We just know it does. And now let's introduce our guest.
Let's do that, man. I've known this guy since the mid 80s. I've been a tremendous fan of his work. He's put out many, many books, coffee table books of his amazing photography. He's a big old deadhead going way back, and he's sort of somehow the semi-official photographer for, it seems, for Dead and Company and lots of other amazing events and bands. Let's give a warm welcome to Jay Blakesberg, please. There you are.
Hey, pal.
How's it going, you guys?
Great.
We're happy to have you.
Thanks. I love that song selection in that first set, with the exception of Big River, which I could always kind of is, to me personally, is not something I really look forward to in a show. But I love, Cold Rain and Ico and Here Comes Sunshine and all that stuff. To me, were just like great ways to just start a show. Seemed very different than all the other first sets they've been doing. I enjoyed it.
Well, I may not agree with your. Go ahead.
No, go.
I was just going to say I may not agree. I may not agree with your disdain for Big River, but I'll defend your right to disdain it to the death. Is all I can say.
Yes,
I have a big question for you, Jay. You have somehow become the guy. I think you might have been the guy who invented the thing of bands taking a photo with the crowd behind them at the end of a show. And I think you might have started that around Fare Thee Well or something. And it's now become an amazing thing. And we see that photo all the time. How did you become that guy? And how did you think that up?
Well, that particular shot at Fare Thee Well, I had been thinking I wanted to do something like that. And the Fare Thee Well one was taken before the show. And Corin Capshaw, who manages Trey and Fish and Dave Matthews, he came up to me and said, Jay, you got to get a shot of the band on stage facing backwards with the audience, in the daylight. I said, I know. Can you help me make it happen? He said, no, you're on your own. He goes, I'll make sure Trey is there, and I'll make sure that Bruce Hornsby's there because he manages Bruce also with Mark Allen, right? And so I knew that there was no way that the band would pose for a photo for me. So I sort of made up a story, and I went to Matt Bush first because Matt gets it, right? And I said, I have this idea. Let's get the band to come out before the last show and thank the audience. Not a bow, not a goodbye, but a thank you, because they're going to do their bow at the end of the night, right? Last show, final show, Fare Thee Well. So I said they can greet the audience and pump their fists and I'm not worthy and bow down and Matt said, great idea, go and sell it to the band. So one by one, I went to Billy and Mickey, who were like, okay. And then I went to Phil and they kept saying, talk to us later, talk to us later. And Bob was like, talk to us later, talk to us later. And then like 15, 20 minutes before the show starts, I go over to Phil and I say, hey, we're going to do this shot. You're going to come out, you're going to greet the audience, you're going to thank them. You're gonna, pump your fist, bow down, turn around, thank the 10,000 people behind the stage, and I'm gonna be up on the drum riser and get the shot. And Phil looks at me and goes,
sneaky fucker.
Yeah, he says, is Weir doing it? I'm like, oh yeah, Bob's in. Hadn't even talked to Bob yet. Okay. But Matt was in. Matt knew all about it. So then I run over to Weir's side of the stage and I say, Bob, we're doing this thing. And he goes, leave me alone. I'm going on stage, Jay. I'm like, no, the photo. He's like, oh, right. Matt mentioned something. What are we doing? And I told him, he goes, okay. I ran out, got up on the drum riser, and I looked at Phil and I gave him the thumbs up. And I'd already kind of coordinated with Candace Brightman and the lighting team, and they lit the stage up for me the way I wanted it. And Phil walked out and waved everybody out. He was the first one out, and they all came out, and the crowd went nuts. I mean, it was a moment. It was like the biggest moment of my career. I felt like that was, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, I had been shooting this band since I'm a teenager, and now I'm the guy on the drum riser, you know, and ultimately I got the shot that sort of defined the 50th anniversary of this band that I've been in love with since I was 15 years old. And so, you know, that arc for me is, you know, going from this teenager who went to Englishtown as a 15-year-old kid in 77 and shot them for the first time in 78 as a 16-year-old to be up on that drum riser. That was a magical moment for me. And I felt like it was pretty magical for everybody that was there. And that was the birth of that experience. And then I kept doing it until Bobby kept saying, do we have to do this again? We have to do like at every Dead show. So I started spacing them out a little bit, but I think that they realized that it was a great shot to use for marketing and social media, and the fans are in the photo. And so it's kind of taken on a life of its own. And then, yes, I guess a lot of other people, I don't know if I was the first to do it, but a lot of people have been doing it since. So happy to be part of that.
So to sum up, it was Corin Capshaw's idea, but you're the guy that made it happen.
Yeah, well, I have been thinking, you know, I've been saying I got to do something like this, and he was the one that sort of pushed me over the edge there and was like, no, like it's all you, Jay, you got to do it. So, and after that picture came out, I think I did an interview maybe in Billboard or Variety magazine or something like that, and I came out and I said, yeah, Corin Capshaw was the guy who sort of pushed me in that direction to say, you need to do this, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make this happen. And, you know, I got some support from, like I said, Matt and the other managers and whatnot. So it was, you know, Benji and whatnot. So it was cool.
Well, first of all, let me say that is one of the most triumphant examples of someone beating the herding cats process of getting everyone in the Grateful Dead to agree on something. That's genius right there. And it also was so contrary to anything any of those guys had done before. The Grateful Dead always walked on stage with less ceremony than any band ever. You know, they spend 5 minutes with their backs to the audience, fiddling with their gear before they played. So this was it was inconceivable that you'd ever see those guys do that. So hats off to you, pal.
Thank you. Yeah. I think they realized also that it was a moment. Like they really did need to thank, you know, that was my pitch. Go out and thank the fans. Don't say goodbye. Don't say, you know, just thank them. And I think they realized that they could do that in a good way. And Mickey, of course, was, you know, he's always game for something like that. You know, Mickey is right there with connecting with the audience and you know, being on that level.
How did you get that far to be the guy that was even in the position to do that? I mean, what does it take to become basically the sort of official photographer of a scene like this?
Hard fucking work and a lot of it.
Okay.
And being in the right place at the right time and showing up. You just got to keep showing up, you know, and that's what I've been doing for the last 40 plus years. I've been showing up on my own or on assignment or, you know, at their asking. I mean, all of those things. And I think that also, you know, when I first started shooting, I was just a teenage hippie deadhead with a camera on tour, taking LSD and following the Grateful Dead, and had a camera with me. And I think when I moved to the Bay Area in the mid 80s, which is about when I met both of you guys shortly after that, you know, I was an adult and I had to get a career or make some money or make a living. And I didn't want to work at the hamburger joint down the street, the vegetarian hamburger joint. I wanted to be a photographer. And so I just started shooting everything that I could. You know, one of my other favorite stories is I used to shoot for Relics magazine, which I still do. I mean, I've been shooting for Relics for 40 years. And we used to do a column with a guy named J.C. Joannis called Bay Area Bits. And we had heard a rumor that they were going to film a video, which was for Throwing Stones at an old abandoned high school in Oakland on Martin Luther King. Well, I just happen to live across the street from an old abandoned high school in Oakland on Martin Luther King Way. And so the day of the shoot, I just walked across the street with a camera and a pocket full of film and just pretended I belonged. And nobody said a word to me. Can you imagine walking on the set of a Foo Fighters video or any band today? And like after about 4 or 5 hours, somebody said, "Who are you shooting for?" And I was like, "Jay Blakesberg, Relics magazine." They're like, "Okay." Like I was there for 10 hours while they filmed that video on the set of that high school, you know? And again, you know, you just got to take risks and put yourself out there. And then, you know, little by little, I was connecting with different band members. I think actually Bob was the first band member to hire me and pay me money to photograph him in July. I think it was July 1st, 1990. He was doing a new project with Rob Wasserman called We're Wasserman. And he said, you know, they said, we need a photographer. And I was doing all this work with Rob for his record that he was making, which I think was Trios at the time. And he said to Bob's people, hey, we've been working with Jay Blakesberg, and I've been developing my skills and creative technical chops with studio lighting and medium format cameras. And because I knew that I couldn't make a living just being a live concert photographer. I knew if I wanted to shoot magazine covers or features or album covers, I needed to understand how to do studio lighting and to do work with larger format cameras. And that was the first time. And Bob Weir paid me money, and I did those publicity shots. And right after that, I did his book jacket author photo for the book he did with his sister, Wendy Weir, the children's book. I did the second children's book. You know, and then Weir needed a publicity photo for this and that. I did a shoot with him for Bicycling magazine. And all of a sudden I was like this guy that anytime I needed tickets to a show, I'd call Bob's office and talk to the woman there and they'd be like, okay, here you go. 2 tickets for every night, 5 nights in Oakland. You're all set. You know, like all of a sudden I became that guy, went from that side of the rail to this side of the rail. And then Mickey hired me to shoot. It wasn't a Planet Drum thing, but it was a thing with Ola Tunji and let me think, Giovanni, Armando Perazza, and somebody else. And, you know, through his manager at the time, Howard Cohen, I went up to Mickey's ranch, and then I started doing stuff with Mickey, and then I started doing stuff with Phil. And, you know, and then when Jerry died, that was really when I more or less went into full gear, sort of working for the band when they did the other ones, and they did the Dead in 2003 and 2004. You know, they kept hiring me to do the band publicity photos. And then further, I did those publicity photos. So it just sort of all, you know, snowballed into, you know, I think that I was somebody that they could tolerate, and they knew that I could work fast because that was a prerequisite. You had to be in and out in 10 minutes. I mean, I know that for a fact, because they've all told me this. Mickey's told me this. Phil's told me this. When they did photo shoots, even going back to the 60s, like with people like Jim Marshall or Herb Green, like their goal at those photo shoots was to try and make the photographer cry. Like they were just out to torture the photographer, right? And so they would do that to me. And I'd be yelling, Mickey, 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 look this way, look this. And that's how you have to deal with these guys. But I would do it in 10 minutes and I'd come away with the portrait that they needed. And it worked, and they got what they needed. And then when it was time to torture me again for 10 minutes, I was the guy that got the call because I guess I could tolerate the torture and they could tolerate me, and it all worked. And so that's where I am.
That's a big part of negotiating this scene is, you know, I mean, you've got those layers of protection around the band, the crew and all that. And you've got to negotiate that and not offend the crew. And then you've got to have a rapport with the band members, and you have to have a rapport with the band members at the same time if you're doing a portrait. It's a tricky thing. You know, one thing I wanted to ask you about, Jay, you know, you have done a lot of beautiful portraiture. People, if you check out Jay's books, you will see fantastic photographs of so many of the greatest musicians of the past 40 years, from Johnny Cash and June Carter to Tom Waits, to you name it. And you do portraiture, you do incredible concert photography in the moment. You capture moments just so beautifully, but you maybe more than anyone else understand the importance of the audience to this music. And you take fantastic pictures of the joy that the Grateful Dead generate, not by focusing on the stage, but on the audience. So talk about, of course, you came out of the audience, so I'm sure you had a more keen appreciation of that than, say, a Jim Marshall or someone like that. So tell us about that aspect of your work.
Okay. Before I jump into that, I want to do one plug for me because I don't like to plug stuff, but this is important because you brought up my books. I have a brand new book that's coming out in August 1st. Jerry's birthday was the date that we chose. The book is printed and it's on the way back to the warehouse. It's called Retro Blakesberg, and it's based on my Retro Blakesberg Instagram that my daughter, Ricky, curates. And Ricky also curated this book as well. And so that's a new book, and it has Grateful Dead in it, but it's mostly not Grateful Dead. And it's a visual autobiography. And it starts with photos that I took in high school of friends in high school.
Oh, fabulous.
And I also wrote, it's separated by decades, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and it's only photographs I shot on film. So there's nothing digital shot in there. And at the beginning of each decade, I wrote like a 2,500 word essay about what was going on with me, my photography, pop culture, and whatnot. And then on top of that, this is super exciting, and I'm really proud of this, and I want to plug this, is that I have my first solo museum exhibition coming up in October. In New Jersey at the Morris Museum in Morristown, New Jersey. And the opening night, I believe, is either going to be October 13th or 14th. And that is also called Retro Blakesberg. And the Morris Museum is a Smithsonian affiliate museum. And they have, I believe, 6 galleries in the museum, and I'm getting 4 of them. So it's going to be about 120 prints. And so this is like, you know, this stuff, what we've been doing for 40 something years, rock and roll, is now in legit real museums. As we know, we've seen it before in other museums, but this is my first big solo. So you'll see it on my social media, but I wanted to mention that before I forgot. There's my new book, Retro Blakesberg, and you'll see that on my social media coming up, announcing in the next week or two, and as well as the museum as it solidifies. But I'm super excited for those things. Going back to Gary's question. Wonderful. Thank you. I'm super excited for those things. Going back to Gary's question, you know, the whole fan thing for me has always been super important. And when I started taking pictures of fans as far back as 1979 and 80, I was just documenting what was going on around me. These were my friends. These were the people we were traveling with, we were on tour with, eating dinner with, sleeping in hotel rooms with, 10 to a room. You know, this is what we were doing. And now 30, 40 years later, we look at these photographs, and it is a document of a time that will never be recreated. I mean, there are all these amazing kids, I'll call them kids because they're 20, 21, 22, 25 that are on tour right now. And I've met them all spinning at the top, you know, wherever they're dancing. Emma and Deanna and Tess and Jen and Jeremiah and Trey, all these great kids that are carrying this energy with them show to show, and I'm photographing them. But the big difference between then and now is this right here, if this is popping up, right? You know, nowadays everything is on social media, and when we were doing what we were doing, even in 1987, you've seen my photos from Laguna Seca or the Greek Theater or Ventura or wherever the shows were, the Frost. There was no social media. We were all in that moment to be in that moment completely organically. And I'm not saying that we're not in that moment today, because we are, and there's a lot of people, but there still is this distraction, right? And some people, I'm not naming names or pointing fingers, but there's a lot of people in rock and roll, not necessarily at Dead shows or Phil shows or anything else like that, that are there to be on social media. And I think that has changed the nature of the experience. And so the experience that I documented on film, pre-internet, pre-digital, is such a unique place and time. And now that 30 years has gone by, I mean, it's visual anthropology of a modern day hippie tribe, just like what's in the Amazon or in, you know, wherever, right? I mean, we are this unique tribe that was born out of the Haight-Ashbury in 1964, 5, 6, you know, and now is getting close to 60 years. And there's a lot of history and a lot of change and a lot of fashion and culture and ideas and music zeitgeist and cultural zeitgeist and the way we think and the way we deal with food and the environment and recycling and people has all essentially come out of this hippie zeitgeist and is the norm for today. And we're also lucky that the thing that connects all of us that are on this program right now and watching this is the Great American Songbook by the Grateful Dead, that we are so fortunate that we get to watch Dead & Co., Planet Drum and Mickey and his projects, Billy and the Kids, Phil and Friends, Wolf Brothers reinvent and reinterpret, not to mention the thousands of tribute acts and cover artists, David Gans and Gary Lambert, both being musicians, right? That are playing this music in bars and clubs and fields and backyards every single night, every single day. And it's because it is the Great American Songbook, and it continues to evolve, and it continues. And I don't care about the naysayers and people that say Dead & Co is this, or Phil is that, or Bobby is this. None of that matters. What matters is the songs, that we get to hear them by the people that wrote them, right, that created them, because this music means so much to me and all of us. And we should just feel so fucking honored that it still exists with these musicians playing it for us. And to me, that's what's important. And that's why I continue to document everything I can in the scene, because it is important from a historical, cultural, and lifestyle perspective till the end of time, while we're still on this earth, in my opinion.
Amen.
Yeah, really. Well said, sir.
Yeah. Jay, something else that you reminded me of is, you shot Fare Thee Well, and the extent to which that was not the end of anything. Phil made a little speech to the crowd where he said, I think, this is not an ending, it's a crossroads, and people diverged, but they all diverged into places where they could express themselves individually and collectively in different combinations. So rather than ending the Grateful Dead ethos, it spread it all over the place, and now you have other bands emulating that ethos and bringing their own personalities to the music, younger bands. It's pretty stunning, and none of us could have anticipated it, but here we are.
I mean, the jam band community, we're 3 generations in, or 4 generations, the Dead and the Almonds, and then Widespread, Fish, String Cheese, Mo, and now you got Eggy and Sponge and Goose and Pigeons, and it just keeps going. It's never going to end. And all of the, Twiddle, all of those bands are inspired by these songs, this music. And I think that, for me, I love seeing all these new bands. I love seeing this music because of the improvisational aspect of it. Listen, I love Tom Petty. I love Tom Waits. I love the Rolling Stones. And I'd go see them and listen to their music and listen to the records over and over again. But to be able to see any of these bands never play the song that they wrote the same way twice, to me, is intriguing and interesting. And that improvisational aspect of the jam band community, and also just the jam band community. Like, I went to Carlos Santana last night at Shoreline, which was fabulous. And I love Carlos and I love his music, but I was looking at the fans, because I was there a week ago with Deadheads, and it's so night and day. They're great fans. They're into the music. People were dancing. But the way the fans interact with each other is on such a different level than at a Dead show or a jam band show or festival in general. The way that the social fabric interacts and interlocks in the jam band community, I think, is also so important, and what makes it so special, that we all have this similar DNA, this psychedelic DNA that connects us all and makes us want to talk and shake hands with the stranger sitting next to you. And it's not like that in other places. Real quick, I know we're probably running out of time. I want to talk about one other quick thing. Is another thing that I've been working on is I've been discovering sort of long lost, dormant photo archives. And there's a guy named Ron Rackett. You guys know his name.
Yes.
And Ron worked with the Grateful Dead from about 1967 to the mid 70s. And me and Josh Barron, who did the Eyes of the World Grateful Dead book 4 or 5 years ago, we were working on a new project, and we found Ron and we started interviewing him. And he said, by the way, I had a camera with me in the 60s when I was working with the band, and I knew how to use it. And so over a period of months, I eventually got down to where he lives down in Southern California, and we went to 2 storage lockers. And I went through all these boxes with notebooks in it. And there was nothing. And I finally found a notebook that said 710 Ashbury, 1967. And I found 9 notebooks full of photos that he took. And we scanned 1,200 photos. Wow. Grateful Dead, The Summer of Janis Joplin, the Jefferson Airplane, and maybe 50 of them have ever been seen. Okay. So there's like 750 photos of the Dead in the Summer of Love that nobody's ever seen, that we're just starting to roll out on Instagram at Retro Photo Archive, and hopefully going to do a book. And then, do you remember Snooky Flowers? He played sax in Janis's band. Yes. I just went to his house. He died 2 years ago, sadly. I just came back from his house this last Saturday with 5 boxes of photographs and found all these incredible photographs of Robert Hunter from 76 and 77.
Oh my
And
God, that's
and those
great.
pictures of Dustin Kreuzman as like a 8-year-old kid with Garcia and Weir and Barlow at that 10/9/76 show with the Who in Oakland. And then another photographer named Beth Sunflower. I discovered her archive. It's been stored for 13 years. There was a photo that both the Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia posted on Instagram maybe 2 months ago. David Crosby jamming with the Dead at the Fillmore West in '70. That's part of that collection that I found. That's been nobody's ever seen that photo. Rack House got a dozen photos of Owsley that nobody's ever seen. Tim Leary in the Black Panthers office in Algeria. So we're discovering all of these photographs, and we're going to start posting them on Retro Photo Archive on Instagram. And it's a project I'm working on with my daughter also, Ricky. And so just all this cool history that we're just sort of trying to aggregate. And David, you're part of that. David and I are doing a book for David right now of his photography, and we're going to take his work and put it out on the Retro Photo Archive also, and let people see some of his work that people haven't seen. So there's all this stuff that has been in closets and shoeboxes and attics and basements and whatever, and it's going to get out there and people are going to see it, and it's mind-boggling.
So
I
great.
can't wait. That sounds so wonderful.
Jay, this is fantastic. I'm a huge jazz fan, and I, know all of these iconic jazz photos from, of Duke Ellington and Miles Davis and Louis Armstrong. And every now and then someone's collection will turn up and there'll be some shot you've never seen before of, two people just playing together who you never knew played together, and it's an absolute revelation. And I saw some of those Ron Racco pictures. You had them in your tent at the Skull and Roses Festival. And
that's right.
As someone who figured I'd seen every Gene Anthony picture and every Herbie Green picture and every Bob Seidemann picture and Rosie McGee, like everything from that era, that's what there was. Seeing those Racco pictures blew my mind, because here are these guys, inside 710 in combinations and in situations I'd never seen before. I think Deadheads are going to be absolutely blown away by those stuff.
One of my favorite photos is of Neil Cassidy sitting in the living room of 710 Ashbury in 1967. I mean, that picture blew me away. An unseen photo of Neil Cassidy in color, in focus, in the living room of 710 Ashbury. Unheard of. Yeah, amazing.
I hate to say it, but we need to wrap this up. The band is coming back to the stage now. This has been so great. Blakesberg.com for most of your stuff, right? And then Retro Archive, is that going to be a website as well?
Yeah. RetroPhotoArchive.com is a website. Retro Photo Archive on Instagram, Jay Blakesberg on Instagram, and Retro Blakesberg on Instagram. So go check all those things out. And thanks for having me, guys. I love you both. I miss you both. David, I'll see you very soon. As a matter of fact, tomorrow morning at my house.
That's right.
Working on the project. And Gary, I'll see you at City Field. That's my
I'll be working here, I think, but we'll see if we can work something out. But and also, please, when you're getting closer to your museum show, come join us on Tales from the Golden Road, and we will get people ready for that. Jay, always a joy. We love you, man, and we'll talk to you soon.